to thank you all for being here and taking the time out of your day for this important conversation, and to remember the Afzaal family who were a victim to an incident of islamophobia today 1 year ago. Today we're going to have tough conversation, so if anytime you feel uncomfortable, make sure that you are taking care of your mental health in a way that you see best, or reach out to us after the panel. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land that we are living on and speaking from is sacred land, deeply connected to and belonging to Indigenous peoples, including Métis and Inuit peoples. Myself and Abrar are currently speaking to you from London, Ontario, which is the land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenapehoik and Attawanrun. I strongly encourage you all to look into the land that you live and honor that land. I hope we can come together today as a community to push change in every way possible and create conversation about Islamophobia and its impact. Now I'm going to turn to Abrar for the opening remarks.
We're going to take them in minutes before that.
Sorry, before we go to Abrar for the opening remarks, we're going to take one moment of silence for the Afzaal family, the reason we're here today, our London family. If you could join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. It is with heavy hearts that we reflect on this loss and start the important conversation about Islamophobia and its impact, while highlighting the resilience of the Muslim community. Now I will turn to Abrar.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and good afternoon from wherever you're joining us today. Thank you so much, and it's really sad for us to come together at such a sad and heartbreaking moment. It brings us a lot of such flashbacks from a year ago here in London, where the Islamophobic incident happened, and if an achievable, nice, lovely Pakistani family was a victim of such a hate and discrimination, where it took a place where it should not be taking that place in Canada. I want us to remember the family today, and I still remember when that incident happened. I was in Hamilton, and I felt scared, I felt sad, I felt shocked, and personally it was really so overwhelming. I took a lot of precautious steps. I told my mom to not go for a walk because she's niqabi. I was like, you're not gonna go by yourself. So I want us to, as we come together today to honor and acknowledge the family, I want us to also acknowledge that Islamophobia and discrimination do exist in Canada and globally, unfortunately, and around the world. And it has such a terrible impact on everyone's mental health, every Muslim who goes through it on a daily basis, especially visible women, Muslim women. As we remember that, we want to remember our duty to talk about it, to start pushing to create such a conversation. It's tough conversation, and it's sometimes it might be not safe, but it's a brave conversation. And we ought to start having that sort of conversation, such as today. And today is such the beginning. And as we do that, I want to take that moment to honor and remember and transfer some of the conversation we already had when we did our pilot project, our Brave Space pilot project back in Hamilton, where we already did run support group, and we brought Muslim women together to listen to them and hear their thoughts and perspective, and how they feel about the Islamophobic incidents that happens on daily, almost daily basis, or frequently, recently in Ontario and in Canada as general. And some of them, they felt that they felt heard and listened and seen for the first time. Some of them, they said that we feel we're not alone, like in that such traumatizing moments and such a tough time, we're not alone. And we feel that space that creates a sense of empowerment and uniqueness, and it helped us to navigate Islamophobia in a different way. And at least it did help us to start having that tough conversation. And we are currently working and trying hard, and hopefully with the enough support and sponsors, to run more of these support groups and create more of these brave spaces across Ontario and hopefully Canada at the end. Because Hamilton is not enough. Hamilton in the beginning, and we want to create more and more and more, so women can come together and feel empowered with their shared experience being Muslim, and hopefully other Muslims. But we're starting with women because it's always different and harder for women. And I hope you find today's conversation insightful, moving, and such a beginning towards a real change, and a beginning for a really bigger conversation around Islamophobia and its impact on our mental health. And its impact on every aspect of our health, especially the mental health. Because if things are not okay, how can you navigate and be resilient enough to be okay with it? So that's what we're aiming to highlight today. It's not just the trauma that comes with the Islamophobic incident, also how resilient and how we can become more resilient as a Muslim community too. So thank you, and I'm going to give it back to Amira to introduce our first keynote speaker.
Hi, everyone. So our first keynote speaker is someone that you might know from social media. Dr. Nahla is a mental health advocate and educator, currently completing her psychiatry residency and sharing important content on Instagram and TikTok. We are so honored to have her here today, so I won't delay any further and I'll let her take it away from here.
Can we take 1 minute to just double check that we're streaming?
We're going to take 1 minute to double check the stream because we are having a bit of technical difficulty. Okay, we are streaming, so we'll get back to Dr. Nahla. Please watch us on HTCI's YouTube as well as our YouTube. We are partnering with HTCI for this panel. We won't let her.
I don't see her coming up.
Sorry about that. Like I said, there was some technical difficulty. Dr. Nahla right now doesn't have some internet connection, so that's why she wasn't able to join. But we are going to move on with Samaya, her live speech, her keynote speech, if she's able to. So I'm so happy to introduce our next keynote speaker, our first keynote speaker for the day. Samaya Puna is a founding member of Nasiha Mental Health, a nonprofit mental health organization that supports optimal mental health from both the community and the individual level. And I'll let her take it away now.
Hi there. I'm hoping you guys can hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, well, I'm just going to proceed with my sort of part about Islamophobia. I essentially became Muslim as a result of Islamophobia, so I cannot fault the system for something that ultimately brought me to the truth. When I was a student of journalism, unfortunately, during the time of 9/11, one thing that sort of brought my attention to Islam was the concerted effort that the media was making towards depicting a community a certain way, and they were doing it deliberately with their choice of colors, their choices of words, and ultimately, I wanted to learn more about the faith because I knew Muslims personally, and they were very decent people. And there was such a divide or disconnect between the way that they were being depicted through the media and the people that I knew personally, which kind of brings me to my first call to action for everybody watching today. I think one of the most important things that we can do to dismantle Islamophobia in our communities moving forward is to foster meaningful connections with our broader community, because ultimately it not only allows us to be better advocates for the messages that we're trying to kind of share with others, but it also helps us to learn about their experiences and understand that we're not just sort of this isolated body, but the challenges that discrimination and oppression can bring to one community is not so different than those that other communities have faced as well. So further to that, I think another important point that we have to consider when we're looking at solutions towards addressing the issue of Islamophobia is to allow your space or yourself the space to process your feelings, because ultimately, we might experience something in a shopping mall or a supermarket store, or when we pick up our kids from school, but we might dismiss it and think that it didn't happen, or maybe we looked at it the wrong way. Ultimately, if you're feeling troubled or bothered by an experience, it's important to honor those feelings and maybe talk to someone that you trust about them to get a second opinion. If you do sort of deliberate that this was something that warrants being reported, that's also a crucial step in the fact that we need, as service agencies, to be able to document this type of behavior or activity, because we cannot advocate at a national level without these numbers and without the evidence of this stuff actually happening. And you're really equipping the service agencies who are trying to help our community with the information that they need to be able to speak on your behalf. So again, really critical to step forward and make sure that your voice is heard. Speak to Abrar. There are a lot of service agencies on this call today that can certainly direct you towards the people who can help you get the help that you need. But I guess going back to my story a little bit, ultimately, it was the fact that the media was trying to depict Muslims a certain way that made me want to learn more about Islam, and then ultimately, want to help the community, because I think that the Muslim community is beautiful. I think that they have a lot of strengths. And I think that we could certainly do a lot more to bridge the gaps with the broader community. And so I try to do that as much as possible with the work that we do at Nasiha, through the helpline and the text support, also through education outreach initiatives. And then ultimately, we've recently introduced web therapy, which gives us the ability to manage cases. And that's kind of my small part. I hope that you guys found it beneficial, and happy to kind of stay on and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Samaya. We appreciate it so much, and thank you for all the work that you do. And thank you for highlighting that we are all here to help if anybody needs support during this difficult time. Next, we are going to go back and have our keynote speech from Dr. Nahla. If she's able to join, I will add her now. I do want to apologize. We are experiencing some technical difficulties as Dr. Nahla is traveling, so her connection is failing a little bit. We will attempt to move on with our artists shortly. Just give us 1 minute to deal with the tech things. I am so sorry about the difficulties. We are having extreme technical difficulties, so we're going to take a little break after that keynote speech. Stay with us.
Okay, this is Mia Bra again. So first, we want to transfer the the apologies from Dr. Nahla because she was not able to make it with us. Unfortunately, she's traveling to Montreal, and sometimes the connection is not really the best. She has no service, and she feels really extreme sad she was not able to join us today. She tried, but the connection did not really was in her benefit. So we're gonna move forward with our artists. I think we're gonna start with our first artist team up. But for the agenda time, we're gonna give 5 minutes, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. So we'll stick to our agenda in that case.
Grab a snack or take a breather.
Yeah, grab a snack or take some deep breathing till we're back.
Checking if anyone can hear me. Is my audio okay? Oh, okay. Okay. So, is there any background noise that you can hear right? I just need some.
You're
Is there a lot of background noise though? Should I move or am I good here where I am? You can text me if you would like to, just so I can make sure. But I might have to do the talk here then and not in the washroom where it's more quiet because unfortunately the service wasn't working there. So, okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm sorry that I'm wearing a mask. I'm just on a train right now. So I'm just in the middle of heading to Montreal, everybody. If at any point you can't hear what I'm saying, I'm happy to repeat it as well. So my name is Nehda. I'm sorry about the delays. I'm sorry about the connection issues. I'm just traveling. I'm very honored to be talking about this with all of you today, and I'm very, very honored that Abrad reached out to me to have this conversation with you all today as well. I wanted to just address 3 quick, and I wanted to mainly just listen in today and be part of this very healing space on the anniversary of a very traumatic incident. And the 3 things I want to talk about, first of all, are that any emotion that you're feeling today, any sort of reaction that you're having to what happened last year and what continues to happen to to Muslims, in the form of Islamophobia, racism, and discrimination. All your feelings are valid. Every single one of your emotions is valid. If you're numb, or if you're not finding the words to what you're experiencing, that's valid. If you're feeling disconnected, or if you're not really sure how you're feeling, that's also valid. That all the range of emotions, anger, frustration, all of them are okay. The reason I mention that is because there's often this idea of like what to look like, and it looks like either being upset or crying or kind of retreating to yourself. But sometimes it looks like grief comes in the form of anger, the form of kind of fighting or want change and enact change, and that's also a form of grief. Let's talk about is these incidents tend to feel like we have to spaces or in the world and globally. And to mention this because I'm with the workplace, and I brought up the fact that institutions can be racist, and the reaction was very much like shock that having like that out loud in public in a meeting with all these people. And I wasn't stating anything in an angry or emotional or aggressive way. It was just a fact that I was stating. And a lot of us are afraid of saying this out loud, even after an entire family was murdered by somebody with the intention of this hatred and discrimination. We still feel say it out loud. And that's not a fault of your own, and that's not because of you, but it's because the systems in place that just make it so difficult for us to feel like we can speak the truth honestly. And once we speak that truth, maybe there's a fear that then there has to be change, there has to be things that get done because of that truth. And I think that's why people are so resistant to us really vocalizing what's happening. But if I can say anything to anyone today, if I can have one message reach you all today, is that speak unapologetically, show up, be loud, and state the facts, be honest about everything. Even if you get those reactions, even if you get the shock and the, oh my God, what are you talking about? Do it, because that is the only way that we can enact change. We have to be very honest about what's going on. And the third thing that I wanted to talk about, while we're in this space that's healing and that's hopefully very open-minded, is, I'm just going to move this a little bit, is this idea of being very well-adjusted to a very, very sick and very unhealthy society. And what I mean by that is that a lot of individuals will expect that with all of the horrible things that are happening in the world and with all of the racism and discrimination, that you are expected to just sort of like move on from it. You're expected to just, be resilient and bounce back and just go back into the world and be okay, whatever that means. And I don't really like that concept, because we shouldn't be forcing individuals to be accepting of injustice, of things that are not okay. That's not natural for us to be living in that kind of environment. So it's okay for you to be very uncomfortable in this society. It's okay for you to feel like you aren't thriving, or you're not okay, or this isn't an environment that's conducive to your well-being. And it's okay for you to be struggling. You don't have to like bounce back after these incidents happen. You don't have to be resilient. You don't have to be functioning, high functioning in a society that dehumanizes a lot of us in this group right now, in this conversation, that dehumanizes you and that makes you feel like you're not worthy or valid or welcome. You don't have to be okay. And that kind of ties into the first point I was saying, where it's okay to feel all the range of emotions, and that includes numbness, that includes disconnection, because trauma often makes you disconnect from your body and disconnect from the present, because it is very difficult to deal with. You can send me a message or let me know.
It seems we're experiencing some connection problems again with Dr. Nahla, but we'd like to thank her for the amazing words she said and for providing that space for reflection and insightful thought, as everyone was saying in the chat. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our artist. Seema Zahra is a multidisciplinary artist working with theaters, magazines, and art institutions in the Waterloo region. We are super excited to have her here today, so we'll put her on the screen now.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me? Okay. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much to Abrar for providing this brave space for us to share our thoughts. Obviously, it's a very, very very disturbing moment for us, and a moment that when I came to Canada, I never thought that after 15-16 years I would be sitting in a place talking about a family who will be killed in a blink of a second, and the people who will be belonging to my own country. But we are brothers and sisters in Islam, and it doesn't matter where we belong. But this incident especially struck me so much because when I read the names of the people, Mr. Afzaal and Madiha and Yumna and their mother and their son. So they were so for names that I have been like my a lot of people in my family have the same names. My best friend has the same name. So it just shook me instantly, and then when I researched more into the incident, more trauma. It brought me more and more trauma because it was the same time as I was in Costco with my 3 daughters. One of them wears hijab, and I also wear hijab. We were out there on June 6th, just 40 minutes away from where the Afzaal family was brutally killed. So it was the greatest shock for me as a Canadian Muslim. And I wrote an article about that, and it's published in the community edition with the name "Will We Ever Find Home?" And I just want to share a poem I wrote for Madiha. And I wrote for Madiha. It's not that I want to talk about Madiha especially, and I don't want to emphasize upon Mr. Afzaal or their daughter Yumna or their son or their mother. But I really want to talk about Madiha because I know Madiha did her civil engineering in 2001 from Pakistan, And then she came to Canada, and then she did her master's from Western University, and currently she was doing PhD in environmental engineering. And similarly, Mr. Afzaal, he completed his master's from Western University. In 2010, he was a physiotherapist. So I was just giving a thought to it. I was just wondering that how much time and energy a person gives in completing those degrees, how much a married woman has to go through to be able to be so productive for a society, and then someone just kills them in a blink of a second. It's just so disturbing. And then after that, I never felt same. Every single day, I go out, I lock my door, and then I look around. Is there somebody who's going to run over me? Is there somebody who's going to kill me today? Will I come back home safe today? Will my daughters be safe? And that's why I wrote something about Madiha. The poem goes with the name Madiha, and this is my tribute to her, my salute to her. And I really very disturbed after this event, and thank you so much for giving me this space to introduce who Madiha was and who Mr. Afzaal was. And so it goes like, Madiha, you were beautiful just like your pretty name. We lost you so early. What a shame. A year has gone by since you left this world, but still the air smells like your blood. They say you were an engineer, a problem solver, a rare being in millions, like a four-leaves clover. With a mind so beautiful, you were working for change, what this civilization fooled the world to attain. But hate could not see you beyond your skin color in a country which boasts of freedom and valor. You were attacked and killed in a fraction of a second. Your kingdom was destroyed. Your dynasty was shaken. Silently and slowly, fear creeps into my spine. I don't love this air anymore, nor the sunshine. I have never felt safe since that time. Yesterday it was your day. Today might be mine. Who knows when hate blindly kills another innocent for language, skin color, lineage, or religion? But Madiha, your light won't ever be forgotten. In this land of darkness, you will shine like a beacon. Your love, your passion won't be forsaken. My words will be there for generations to reckon. Thank you so much for having me and giving me this space to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seema. That was so moving. We really resonated with what you said, and we appreciate your words so much. So next we're going to move into our panel. We have a panel of four renowned Muslim women, as well as a moderator for that panel. So I want to start by introducing our moderator, Salsabila, who's the founder of Youth Gravity, a platform for young leaders, and is completing her bachelor's at U of T. It looks like she hasn't arrived yet, but I'm going to introduce to you our panelists now. Amira Al-Wabi is a journalist, currently a contributing columnist at the Toronto Star, and a human rights activist. Hi, Amira.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, no problem. Thanks for being here. We're really honored. Our next panelist is Kulsum Pathan. She's a community initiatives coordinator at Islamic Relief Canada and an active member of the community supporting youth and vulnerable populations. Okay. Hi, Kulsum. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Next, we have Cobra Hagar, who is the programs manager at our partner for this event, the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, and a co-founder of the Hamilton Encampment Support Network.
Assalamu alaikum.
Next, we have Maria Bangash, the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Smile Canada and a social media influencer who dedicates her time and energy to disability advocacy. Hi. How are you?
Hey.
Take it from here. Take it from here.
Can you hear me? Are you okay? Can you hear me? We're good?
Yep.
Perfect. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So wonderful to meet you all. And such an honor. I have been probably fangirling over all of you for last couple days, ever since Abrar asked me to host this panel. So I just want to start by saying it is unfortunate what brings us together. Just thinking about thinking about what happened a year ago, what happened even a couple of weeks ago in Buffalo, New York, what happened in couple days ago, I think now we can say in Texas. All these incidents are happening. And I think this always brings me back to the question, why isn't our government doing enough? Or what is it that we wanna change about our government? That would probably be the theme of all the questions I ask you, but I want to start by talking about Islamophobia. Islamophobia, we understand it as an experience where someone does something almost morbid for just because we believe in certain faith. So I guess like I would ask to everyone, and everyone can take a turn to kind of talk about, have you ever personally experienced Islamophobia, or how does the idea of Islamophobia impact your daily lives? So I'll start with Amira, because Amira, I have you on my left side. But if you want to kind of talk about your experience with Islamophobia, or how do you even perceive Islamophobic incidents?
Well, thank you so much for that question, Salsabila. And it is really, really lovely to be with all of you today. I thank Abrar and Amira for their hard work in making this panel come together. It's so inspiring to see young, strong Muslim women reclaiming and taking up space like this. And for each of you as my fellow panelists, Maria, it's lovely to see you, and Cobra and Kulsum. I think what's so important in these moments of mourning and sadness, that we do come together in this way and talk about these experiences. So thinking about my own personal experiences of Islamophobia, I was experiencing it before I even knew the term existed, to be quite honest. It was, I remember one of the most poignant and scary memories that I have actually was going for a walk in my own neighborhood many, many years ago. I think my daughter at the time was, maybe 3 years old or just under 3 years old. And I had her in the stroller, and I was near a Shoppers Drug Mart in my neighborhood where I grew up. And someone driving a pickup truck, a black pickup truck, drove very fast, very, very close towards me, and then swerved at the last minute while swearing. And I couldn't even believe what was happening. This is probably around 2005. We hadn't, the language, as I said, really, we knew about anti-Muslim sentiment, but for me, I just didn't really fully grasp what Islamophobia felt like, even though we had been talking about, as I said, anti-Muslim sentiment. So that memory certainly came back to me when I heard about the horrific attack that took away the lovely, lovely family, the Afzaal family, Salman, Talat, Madiha, Yumna. May God have mercy and just surround them in a beautiful paradise. And when I think of their little boy, Faisal, who survived and has had his family taken from him in such a horrific attack. I remembered that, and I think that many of us do still fear, as the previous speaker mentioned, saying, we think about that safety, and it's, on one hand, it's you don't want to be afraid. You don't want to be a victim. You don't want to have to talk about these traumas and re-traumatize yourself. But at the same time, just as you said, Salsabila, there is, of course, a responsibility that we want to hold levels of government, decision makers accountable for in terms of how we address hate in our communities. So from the personal to the political, and they say, the personal is political, it is important that as we share with each other, that we also think collectively on how do we ensure that no one from any community, whatever your background, ever is fearful for their safety and can fully participate in society.
Thank you so much, Amira. I will come back to you to talk more about policies, and I know you have done an incredible job on redefining the idea of multiculturalism. So I would come back to you, but before that, I want to go to Kulsum and kind of get your perspective on Islamophobia and how has that impacted your identity and how you have been and your belonging to Canada.
So to be completely honest, I was talking to Abar about this as well. I actually, alhamdulillah, have not experienced Islamophobia as a hijabi. I've experienced racism before I started wearing the hijab, but I didn't experience Islamophobia before. I haven't experienced it yet. Alhamdulillah.
Mm-hmm.
I think like for me, the hijab has always been a sense of protection almost. Like I feel like every time I'm in a sketchy situation, somehow something just comes to protect me, and someone's there to just protect me. And I think like the greatest thing was like at the Raptors parade, I felt like I was so protected because there was someone behind me that was always making sure that I was okay. If people were like being inappropriate, like the person behind me was just there to support me. I didn't know this person, but they were just there to like make sure that no one was inappropriate with me, that like no one was being disrespectful. And when the whole shooting thing happened, that person was also there to make sure that I was okay. So I feel like at that moment, I felt like my hijab saved me, and just kind of kept me safe. So alhamdulillah, like that's been my experience. But as a non-hijabi, I had like one person come up to me and tell me that they can put me in their car and like no one would even notice. I was told to go back to my country. So it's very interesting to see the difference in things. But I think when the whole attack happened, I did have a moment of like a fear where I was like, I'm such an outgoing person. I'm always like doing things. So for me to like stay at home and be like, this could have been my family, like that was very scary to like even put that into a thought to be like, this could be something. So it did make me like stay home for a bit, and it did like scare me. But then at the same time, I had that idea of like, okay, like I'm not gonna, like, so far Allah's protected me and has made sure that I'm safe, and like I'm not gonna stay home and like hide because one person has a certain way, like they feel a certain way about me and what I wear. So then I decided to like just go out and continue to be myself and have faith that like Allah will protect me, like just as He's always protected me, I guess.
Was it, sorry, just to follow up, so was it a stranger who supported you at the
I actually went by myself, and it was some random person that decided to just like be there the entire time. And I only realized when like there were a bunch of other girls around me, and like they were being catcalled, touched inappropriately, like being hit on, and like this one person was like very, very supportive, and like every time someone would try to walk behind me, he would push me forward and then like kind of like keep a space between us and get them to go behind him. And I was the only hijabi in that area. So it was very interesting to see that like this person who doesn't know me was able, like, respected my hijab enough to understand that like I don't like that I wouldn't want to be in that space kind of thing. So it was very nice and very like unexpected. Like I was so confused. I was like, who are you? What do you like? But he was like, he didn't try anything either. He was just very like friendly. Like I'm just here to help you. So yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'll go to Kubra now. Am I saying it right, Kubra?
Yeah, that's correct. But thank you. Yeah, just I guess before I start off with my little spiel, I did want to thank you all for being here and for moderating this conversation. And I think it's a really important and crucial conversation to have. So yeah, I think similarly to Amira, like a long time ago, or when I was younger, I didn't necessarily put a term to what this experience is, right? Like I understood that from a very young age, I did understand that many people had feelings about Muslims, and many people, treated me in different ways, or my family differently, because of our religion, and also, compounded by the fact that I'm also a Black Muslim, right? So that's an added intersection in my identity that also affects the way in which I'm perceived by people in society as well, right? But of course, as I got older and kind of had space to be around other Muslims to kind of share these conversations and share these experiences, is when I was really exposed to kind of the terminology behind that. But I guess, the terminology isn't as important as like the actual lived experiences, right? So, I'm not going to sit here and like go into a bunch of like detailed examples on like what's happened throughout my life. But well, I'm currently 21 years old, and I've been wearing the hijab since I was in elementary school, since about the 5th grade. So it's been a long over a decade of like being a visible Muslim, visible Black Muslim woman. And I've had experiences at school where people have made terrorist jokes, and I think that's like a very typical Muslim youth experience at this point. Even in terms of, I actually remembered this story very recently when I was having a conversation with a group of people about what the school environment looks like. And this was, I think, when I was in grade 9. It's a very random example that I completely shut out of my brain, because I think that's one thing that we also tend to do, is kind of forget these experiences. And I think it's, a survival mechanism, and very much so a coping mechanism. And and I'm grateful for it most of the time, because I don't have to remember, the heinous experiences that I've had. Similarly to Amira, for example, when I've had people drive past me and roll their windows down and say really nasty things to me, or slow their cars down and stare me down and things like that. But I remember this one particularly because I think I was in grade 9. I was running for student government at that point, and that was like my first step into like trying to get involved in the school community. And I was running for a position against an upper year high school student, probably grade 11 or grade 12. A random position. I don't even remember what it was. Like honestly, like it's so irrelevant at this point. But back then, I remember that person. It was he was a white boy from Burlington, and this was in Hamilton. But I had a French school in Hamilton, and he made a joke about making a poster with a picture of me in an airplane crashing into 2 towers, as like, I don't know if that was like an attempt at a smear campaign towards a 9th grader. I don't really know. And I remember just feeling so hurt, and I cried about it, and I was so upset about it. And I remember like that really hurt my feelings, because I was like, I didn't even know that he was running, like, and this is just for fun. Like if I lose, it's not that serious. And if he, I never thought it was that serious. Like, and I did normally, like, I wasn't a kid, alhamdulillah, who was like bullied at school in the sense that like most of the time I had really friendly relationships with most of the people that I knew at school, right? So I thought that was like a really foreign experience, and I did shut it out. But I think that is something that like should be talked about, because in the experiences that our youth have in the schools are really real and really hurtful. And I think that's like something that we should discuss, and like leave the space for the young Muslims in our community to talk about how those experiences have impacted them, and what can we do to support them, right, through those experiences, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that, Kubra. I mean, you brought up something really interesting about the idea of blocking something out of our memory when something traumatic as what happened to you. And every time there's incidents that happen to us, we just completely shut it down. We act as if we don't have a safe space to talk about these things, one, and two, sometimes even our parents. I know my parents are immigrants, so they don't really have understanding of what it is. All they know is about either fighting back or just talking back or walking away. There's no way to heal or cope with it. And I think this is the good time to kind of thank Abrar and everything the team is doing for us to create such a space, like Brave Space, to share our thoughts and these experiences. So thank you so much for sharing that, Kubra. And I'll come to Maria. And last but not least, definitely one of the most wonderful advocates I have come across. What has been your thoughts? Just, I guess right now we should really talk about thoughts on Islamophobia, because it seems like everyone has different lived experiences. I would be really curious about your thoughts on Islamophobia, or how has that impacted you, or not impacted you, but your family members, loved ones. Yeah.
Sure. So firstly, I want to thank Abrar and her whole team for inviting me again. It means so much. You've always given me space to share about my life and my intersections. And as well, I'm so sorry to hear about all of your individuals' experiences. They're heartbreaking, they're gut-wrenching, but at the same time, it's things I've heard and grown up with. So in some sense, you feel numb to it when you hear it so many times, and it sucks and it does hurt. For me, Islamophobia has tied in with ableism all my life. I've had my lunchbox experiences where I open my container of rice and my mom gave me like a little bit of yogurt or chutney or something, and I open it and the whole class goes like, "You." I've had those mild experiences. My biggest take with Islamophobia is in the healthcare scene. Being a Pakistani woman and having both my parents from Pakistan, in most of my medical appointments, I was often accused of my parents being belated, hence that I was born with a disability. This accusation came very quickly and hindered 90-something% of my health procedures. And at every single appointment, I would be fighting for my life, trying to explain my disability and what it is and why I deserve treatment. Islamophobia comes in the form for me of medical practitioners talking at my mom and not talking with my mom. Or they talk to me assuming that my family members don't understand. And at a young age, I didn't understand how to stand up for my family or stand up for myself. I was scared that if I said something, I'd lose treatment. I'd lose my appointment. I'd lose my doctor. We were scared. We wanted medicine. We wanted treatment. So we sucked it up and we stayed silent. It was only in my teen years, like the rest of you, I learned and kind of clocked in what is Islamophobia and how does Islamophobia affect me maybe in a more subtle way. Because outwardly, when I'm out on the street by myself, I've never dealt with Islamophobia to my face. If I'm with my besties who have hijabs, if I'm with my mom who wears a hijab, it's a different story. When I hand somebody my health card or my passport, they look at my name for a couple seconds and they look up at me, and then something registers, and suddenly I'm treated completely differently. It's moments like that where I feel helpless in a physical sense too, because I can't defend myself. That's the reality. I don't travel alone anymore after this incident at all. I've always had a friend with me or a family member because I am scared. I am not in a position to protect myself. So this incident and Islamophobia as a whole has really impacted the way I'm able to experience and live my life. And after this, I haven't really learned how to move forward.
Thank you for sharing, Maria. That is, I think you brought up such an important point about what is Islamophobia and how it can come in different forms. Healthcare is such an important and underrated underrated conversation, if I may say, because we don't really talk about how Islamophobia shows up in healthcare every single day. Or I know many of my friends who went to the doctor and the doctor kind of just treated as if someone has low deficiency in iron or something else. I think a lot of the times we go to the doctor and we talk about these symptoms, but it's kind of like put under the rug or we're not even taken seriously. Treat it, and then like of course treat it differently as soon as people see our names or our photo, and that's basically it. Thank you for sharing. Islamophobia does come in different forms, and it also impacts us in different ways as well. I think the next question would be kind of throwing out in the, like anyone can kind of respond to it, but I guess we're kind of also talking about Islamophobia and how it impacts us, but how do we also build resiliency against Islamophobia or against the racism, the negative experiences a lot of us share? How do we build resilience against it? And I would kind of throw it to anyone who wants to respond to that.
I guess I could go. Sorry, I was like, I don't know, really. I feel like everybody was kind of in the same headspace as to like who goes. Anyways, so I think the conversation around resilience is one, like a really important one, mainly because, like I mentioned earlier, one major thing that we do to kind of be able to survive through a lot of these experiences that we do have is, what are the coping mechanisms that we use? Blocking these experiences out, not talking about them, shutting them out, ignoring them, acting like they're not, that they don't exist. And I think that's like one big myth or something that we should, dismantle out of the idea that resilience also means like, I'm strong, therefore like these things don't affect me. Because I think the conversation around strength and the conversation around building resilience also involves a lot of a lot of sentiments that neglect actually feeling your emotions. And I think that that is a very unproductive way to kind of approach that and like approach that conversation. I think it's really important to feel your feelings, right? And to really sit with how you feel. And yes, like for example, pertaining to what happened to the Afzaal family last year, but also all other instances of Islamophobia or racism, ableism, and any other forms of discrimination that you may have dealt with. Because you know, a lot of the time, these forms of discrimination also like result in actual violence, like you know, refusing to treat a patient the way a patient deserves to be treated is violence. You know, refusing to listen to youth when they're telling you that this is an ongoing problem in their schools and they're feeling bullied and you know whatever other experiences that they're going through, and you're an educator or a teacher, you're listening to that and ignoring it, that's also violence, right? So I think, you know, building resilience, yes, involves knowing that you're like greater than whatever people are trying to put you within, and like you're bigger than that box that people are trying to so desperately fit you in. But at the same time, it's, you know, being around community and prioritizing community and community care. So I think one big piece is the fact that as a community, we can build resilience together and not as individuals. It really involves being around those who care for you and those who you care for, because it's very much so an interdependent relationship and not a, you know, one thing depending on another or one person depending on another. It's us relying on each other for safety and us relying on each other for care and for resilience, right? So I would say one major thing that I take into account is, you know, being there for my community and paying attention to what the needs are there, and also expressing my needs to my community, and also knowing and trusting that they'll be there to also support me through those experiences.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kubra. So two things I think we're kind of getting to is, one is taking the time to really feel ourselves and feel the emotions we have, and also relying and building that community that where we can have that community care. I think that goes both ways from ourselves to share the experiences, but also from our community elders to also accept the emotions we are sharing, accept the experiences that we are talking about. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else want to talk about resiliency?
I can go. So I just want to say that, Kubra, like you brought up a great like point when you were saying that we kind of suppress our experiences and we kind of just push them aside. Because as you were saying that, I remembered when I was in high school, people used to call me Osama bin Laden all the time. And I never like, I was like, oh, they're just being racist. I never associated that with Islamophobia, because I was like, I'm not a visible Muslim. Like I wasn't wearing a hijab. I started wearing the hijab a couple of years ago. So any experiences that I had, I always just was like, oh, you're just being racist. But I never related that to being Muslim, because I wasn't a visible, like I didn't look like a visible Muslim. So that was like very, very interesting, because like I've always been like, oh yeah, like alhamdulillah, like, you know, as a hijabi I haven't, but as a non-hijabi I guess I have, and I've just repressed it so much that like it never clicked in. But in terms of like your question where it comes to like how we can build resilience, like I also agree with the fact that like having a sense of community and having people that support you and care about you. So like when I wanted to start wearing the hijab, the biggest thing was like my parents were very scared that people would be mean to me, that I would be discriminated against, because I am a very happy-go-lucky person, right? And they're like, Kusum, your head's in the clouds, like, you know, this and that, like what if someone hurts you? And so they were just scared for my safety. And I remember my mom being like, oh, like what if someone doesn't hire you? What if you're not able to get a job? Like what if, like all these things, which are valid concerns. And my answer was always like, why would I put myself in a space where they wouldn't appreciate me, where they wouldn't accept me for who I am, right? Like if they can't accept my hijab, then they probably won't accept me leaving or having like a longer lunch break on Fridays to go pray Jama, right? Like they won't accept me leaving or like taking a 5-minute break to go pray my salahs. Like all those things are things that like you want to put yourself in a community where you're able to kind of be yourself and really like have that support, and then go from there and like kind of conquer the rest of the world in terms of like you have a support system to support you. So if someone were to stop me, or if a company were to say that like you can't leave for an hour to go pray, and like then I would know that my community is going to support me. If I were to say something about this, I would have people behind me, right? So I think a sense of community is like something that's very, very important to have. And to also just be like mindful of like why you're doing what you're doing, right? Like, and having like renewing your intentions daily and being like, okay, I'm doing this because I want to change the world. I want to like change my own life and then help others feel empowered to change their own life as well. So those are all things that helped me through it, because I remember when this did happen, like I did stay home for a bit, and I was scared, because I was like, I don't know who's out there. I don't know how scary people are. But then when you like think back and you're like, I'm going to take back the power and know that like, at the end of the day, like I have a community, alhamdulillah, that will support me, that will take care of me. And like just going out with like my friends and making sure that, we're all being very like aware of our surroundings, which I feel like we shouldn't have to do that, but we do have to do it to make sure that we're all safe. But then like continuing to go out and making ourselves known in public. So yeah,
such incredible perspective. I think it's so interesting that you brought up the intentions idea. I think quite often we kind of I've had friends where they were a little people like gave up on hijab because they felt uncomfortable, or they thought that they were going to be judged for trying out for a job or going to a specific school, a specific degree, and their supervisor didn't like it, or their supervisor was very discriminatory. They gave them a hard time, and people sometimes compromise their identity, compromise who they are for the sake of attaining something. So it's so interesting to kind of think about like who is the person that you want to become, and if you are in a space where they force you to kind of compromise your identity, is it really worth being in that space? Is there any way we can work around it? Very, very important question. And community, again, the idea of community keeps coming up. Absolutely, really important. Anyone else wants to? Maybe we'll take one more answer, or quickly both answers. Anything works, or no answer at all.
Yeah, I could
Oh, yeah,
go.
go ahead. Okay.
So the points that both of you made about community really resonated with me, because I never had like this voice or platform. From a young age, I had nobody to relate to me with the intersection of my disability, let alone being Muslim. I struggled to mingle with the Muslim girls in my community because, to put it bluntly, they didn't want me there. They didn't want to accommodate me. They didn't want to involve me in their activities and their outings, and they said that it was too much work. So a lot of times I felt like I didn't have anybody around. And first I did sulk and I cried and I stayed home and I missed out on all the events and whatnot. And after some time, the only way I thought that I could get a community is if maybe I went looking for one on my own that wasn't directly in my area, which is what pushed me into doing what I do now and kind of speaking up and using my intersections in a way to more empower myself, but also create a dialogue. I think, there are so many spaces and institutions that are owned by our Muslim community that often forget about disability and don't include us in those discussions and dialogues. I went to an event this weekend and I was sitting in the corner at the very back, and everybody in front of me sitting was super tall. I couldn't see anything. I had to crane my neck up to the screen, and there was nothing they could do to accommodate me at all. And I had to just sit there and take it. When I was trying to grab dinner, I think like 10 people trampled over me and like went all over my wheelchair. And like my wheelchair is expensive. I cannot buy a new one like just tomorrow at a car dealership. It's a lot of money. So it's things like that that make me feel left out of the community and make me feel like I don't belong. And it's like an internal battle almost, because I have to remind myself it's not everybody. It's just, unfortunately, there is a lack of dialogue in our community about this stuff. So I always put this emphasis on like educating and growing together. I am not perfect myself. I have gaps in my own life. I have experiences I lack, and I have so much to learn. But I also think that I have some experience where I can help others learn and help others see through my eyes. So whenever I'm in these spaces, I always think about how can I, being Muslim, being a woman, having a disability, how do all these intersections of mine affect me? And how do I move forward to help somebody understand what that's like for me? Because I've said this in almost every speaking event that I do, but I never want another young Pakistani girl to grow up the way I did. Let alone Pakistani, just another Muslim girl to grow up the way I did, because it's unfair and it's sad and it's lonely, and it shouldn't have to be this way. I know it doesn't have to be this way. There's like the easiest quick fix solutions for these issues and discrimination that I face. And I think as a community, we're a lot more stronger and a lot more advanced to put past them.
Mm-hmm. Jazakallah for sharing such a profound perspective, and I love how you brought up a few times the intersectional identity and the importance of raising awareness about everything, like all your experiences and what it is to be in your shoes. And I think what is interesting is that you are taking the space to make sure that people are you're taking the space to raise awareness about your needs. And if you don't talk about your needs, no one is going to know about it. No one's going to have the understanding that there is a need to become an ally, and then actually how to become an ally. I think those are really, really important perspective, and I think really key tools to become a resilient. Amira, do you have like something super quick? Sorry, or just I was gonna ask one more question, but yeah, if you have
I'll be super quick. I mean, Cobra,
Okay,
Maria, Kulsum have really touched upon so many important points. You know, I think what's really interesting though is how this conversation is actually addressing 2 points of growth for us as individuals and as a community.
Mhm.
The first is, you know, how do we do as individuals, how are we engaging with sort of beyond our own communities, beyond our own Canadian Muslim communities, with the broader public, where we're trying to educate about Islamophobia. We're talking about all the different intersections. You know, Cobra talked about being a Black Muslim woman. Maria talked about being, you know, Pakistani, disabled, with a disability, living with a disability, and, you know, growing up in a Pakistani home, and all these intersections. And these are all, you know, new conversations, honestly, like that we have started to really have and share with the broader public. But the second point that I think is being raised here is the internal conversations within our communities. And I'm only growing as well, and I'm only learning as well, of how within our own communities, we still have a lot of growth to do, and we still have a lot of listening to do. And when Maria describes that experience of being almost trampled on, you know, my heart breaks. I mean, first of all, that should be an obvious, that Maria should have been brought to the front of that room. She should have been provided the support and accommodation to be able to get her dinner without being harmed or potentially harmed, or her wheelchair being damaged. But that really speaks to that lack of internal conversations. And so again, it really points to the need for more of these brave spaces where we are creating an opportunity for people with different backgrounds within our communities, different intersectional identities, to talk with one another. Unfortunately, a lot of times when you are going to our sort of more traditional institutions, you are seeing sort of communities kind of sticking together, you know, where you're not seeing enough of that interaction between young and old, and different cultures, different, you know, gender, you know, all of the different identities that we hold. And so I think that to build resilience individually and as a community, we really need to be able to talk and listen and learn about how we are working internally to build and support one another in the needs that we have, and then thinking about how do we communicate that externally, and how do we come together to have a consistent sort of message, and to work towards helping remove the barriers in our society that are rooted in, you know, institutions that, you know, do have a variety of institutional racism, systemic racism, including Islamophobia and other forms of racism, unfortunately built in. And so we've also heard that term of decolonizing our institutions, etc. So just to say that, and to keep it brief, it's an internal, external exercise in building our resilience.
Thank you so much for sharing, Amira. You just hit it. You hit it at the. I mean, you just summarized so well about community work and everything that we are learning. We are kind of running out of time, I think, a little bit. But I guess I kind of wanted to ask you, Amira, like when we were talking about multiculturalism, and I think it would be thrown to everyone as well. Anyone can answer this question. But I know Canada takes a lot of pride in making ourselves look like or Canada as a government makes themselves look very multicultural and very welcoming to everyone. And then when incidents such this one happens, we are just completely dumbfounded. We're not sure where this country is going. Do you think it is still valid for Canada or just Canadian people to take the same pride as they do in being multicultural?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. And I do want to hear from my panelists because I'm learning so much from them and I love to listen. But just to be very, very quick, look, we have to understand, and this is something that we have grown to understand, and I actually talked about this in some of my talks. Canada was built on oppression. It was built, in a genocide. We have a house that is built on a foundation that is rotting. And we have not yet addressed that in the terms of how Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities have been treated historically and how they are treated today. And as Canadian Muslims, part of that resilience, I think, will come from standing alongside these communities, in particular the FNMI communities, because if you want to make a house beautiful, if you want to say that this house is decorated with multiculturalism and everybody's welcome in this house, but you know that that foundation is crumbling, it's not surprising that many different communities are struggling with discrimination and racism, and you're seeing the rise of, anti-Asian racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, unfortunately the list goes on. So we really need, as Canadian Muslims, to stand in absolute solidarity with our Indigenous communities and work towards reconciliation within our own communities, figuring out how do we help, how do we support, how do we speak about these issues, stand in allyship, and let these communities tell us what they need from us as settlers on these lands. And then, as we start to do that repair work, I really believe that the house starts to get rectified. And that means that all of us start to understand, where do we need to fix those barriers? Where do we need to remove them? Where do we need to address, as I mentioned, decolonizing institutions to make sure that wherever there are those barriers, wherever people are being, racially profiled, whether they are facing disproportionate impact of a justice system, for instance, that is putting, Black and Indigenous people behind bars more so than the general population, et cetera. When you look at all these different systems, there's so much that needs to be rectified. And I think that Canadians and people who are coming to this country, we like to think of ourselves as that multicultural sort of paradise on earth. But when you dig at it, I think we can all agree that, we have a lot, we have values, there are values in this country that we can aspire to, but it's an aspiration. We're not at the destination.
Thank you so much for sharing, Amir. That was a very in-depth response to you. And of course, we're looking back to what Canada is really built on and where we're heading, both needs to be addressed. Anyone else wants to share anything about their understanding of multiculturalism, or how they vision Canada to be when Canada says that it's a multicultural country, but really we know it's not. There's still a lot of gaps there. Anyone wants to share?
I think Amira really hit the nail on the head. I don't really know these expressions, but hopefully that was the right one. I honestly don't even have much to add other than, because Amira literally said everything. It's exactly that. I think it's really, I want to even use the term annoying when people are, this outside publicity of what Canada should be like, or what people envision Canada as. And for example, I have family in the UK, and I have family in the United States, and family back home, in Sudan and in Chad as well, who have this idea that Canada is this country that is just super multicultural, welcoming, XYZ. But, there's a lot that has to go into the conversation around what Canada was built on, like Amira mentioned. But also when folks are, multiculturalism can't be the pinnacle and end all be all. If the one thing is, accepting people into this country and allowing multiple folks to live in here, what is the government actually doing to support these communities that are often also even, struggling communities? We see a disproportionate amount of Indigenous and Black folks unhoused in encampments around all across, the country. We see folks having difficulty accessing healthcare. We see, for example, in Hamilton, when the housing average for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,500, but folks can only get a maximum of around $1,200 on ODSP. What does that mean, right? So I think, putting up this multicultural facade, yet not being able to support these communities that are actually in need for better supports and in need, of access to these different supports and services, I think that's where the conversation should start, and rather than putting up like this idea that we're just, this ideal multicultural country.
Kubra, what a wonderful response as well. Thank you so much for sharing. Kusum and Maria, no pressure though. No?
I think everything they said is exactly, it's perfect. Like there's nothing more for me to add, I guess.
No worries. Thank you so much for sharing. So before we part our ways, we want to use this time to kind of take an opportunity to share any thoughts, feelings, condolences to the family who were tragically taken away a year ago. If you folks want to share anything or any advice for Muslim and Muslimas that are living in this society, continues to struggle with the grief and the trauma that has taken place. So this is kind of use a space to share any thoughts.
I know time is ticking. Maria, though, I wanted to make sure that Maria went first because you didn't have a chance to answer the last one, Maria.
Oh, I thought you wanted to go first because of the time constraint, but sure, I'll be quick though because I know you have to go. I remember when I found out about this terrorist attack, I was literally out for a walk with my mom and my younger sister who was in a wheelchair. We went to the park and we came home. And I opened Twitter and I was I was sitting in my wheelchair just staring at my phone. And I was like, there's no way, this doesn't feel real. We talked about it at home. It was scary. It was heartbreaking. And it was just so much why? Why has this happened? Why were these lives innocently taken away? Why was this racially motivated? Why was this hate crime committed? There were so many questions in the air, even though I had at that point become so used to hearing these things, whether they were abroad or in our own home. I think it's so important. Let this terrorist attack be a reminder that this is not the first incident in this country, and I don't know when it would be the last. We have such an ignorant society we unfortunately live in, and such a desensitized society that does not understand the severity of these things in our communities. When we lose people of our community, when certain voices in our community are not listened to, or disabled and Black voices are not emphasized and not heard. You know how many spaces I go into, how many offers I reject, because I know I'm just one more white face in the space, and I know that someone else could do that space more justice. I think it's high time that people that have the power, the privilege, our politicians, the people that come to our events and our mosques with their little vote for me cards, I think it's high in time that they start taking their place and taking action. We have the right to call these people out on their nonsense and on their ignorance and on their complacency. We have every right to speak up and be frustrated and exhausted. It's completely normal. I'm exhausted myself. Sometimes after I do an event, I have to take a day off the next day because reliving your trauma and hashing that out for people to watch and listen to is exhausting. Now imagine the life of the extended family of the family we lost. They have to live with this. And this is a reality until the day they die. And that is horrifying. Take this terrorist attack as something to reflect on. Take it as something that this shouldn't have happened. And there are so many, I said this in the beginning, there are so many easy and preventable fixes to ensure these things are not happening. And it does start with conversations like this. And it does start with getting the lived experiences of those that have suffered and that have lost. So I thank all of you panelists for your time and your stories and your knowledge. I promise you I have learned in abundance, and I'm so blessed to be sharing this space with you today. So thank you so much.
Maria, jazakallah for such a everything that you have shared. It has been an honor and privilege for us to share this space with you. You have brought such really, really important. But one thing I think, because the election just passed a couple of days ago, the provincial election in Ontario, I think it's really important for us to kind of reiterate the point that are we really choosing leaders who are willing to really share our perspectives and emphasize on our lived experiences. It has been a year since this tragic event happened, but did anything really change policy-wise in Canada, in Ontario? And you're right, very, very important point. The leaders have to show up because they need to. They want to represent us, not because they are looking for power, or they're just showing up all those colorful papers and just handing them out for free. That's not the purpose. Thank you so much, Maria, for everything that you have shared. I will come to Kulsum because if Kulsum also didn't get a lot of opportunities to speak, but yeah.
I know Amira has to leave, so Amira can go first. It's totally fine. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Kulsum. Yeah, thank you so much. I do have to hop off very, very quickly. What I want to say is, look, each and every one of you has a role, whether you're thinking about potentially running for office. Why don't we see more young Muslim women thinking about getting into those positions where they're making decisions for our communities? Why not? Why don't we start encouraging each other to do more in our communities, to participate in that political process? I think that, if anything, what I've been really inspired while I've been here in London the past few days is young people are really demonstrating that this is not the time for us to absolutely be frightened or worried. This is the time for us to pick up, the mantle that has been left behind by this beautiful family, their example of community participation and engagement, of taking their dreams and wishing to make this world and society a better place. Let's take that on. Let's take that mission on. The Youth Coalition to Combat Islamophobia, a group of young Muslims here in London, many who were friends with Yumna. I've been in awe. I have been in awe of how resilient they are and how determined they are. You should watch the video that they've produced. You should go to their Instagram and check it out. They are showing us that this is the time for us to show up, to participate, to engage, to be aware. And while it's not perfect, there have been some moves to address Islamophobia in this country. The federal government has indeed, today announced the special envoy on Islamophobia. The applications are open. People can apply to take on that really important role. There are efforts to do a strategy to combat hate. There's an anti-racism strategy. But we need all of this at every level of government. And the only way that's going to happen is for us to participate, to pay attention, and to get engaged. I have to hop off. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much, Amia. Okay. I am so sorry. So my screen was minimized, so I think that's what it's called. So that's why I didn't see any of the comments or anything else that came up. So I apologize to all the folks that are out here. Ask questions in the comment section, and also all the instructions that I was being given. I just completely missed everything, so I am so sorry. Kuzu and Kubra, if you folks can take it and share your thoughts.
Okay, I can go. Well, actually, Kubra, do you want to go first? No? Okay. Okay, so what Amira was saying, I completely agree with her, and I think I was going to say something along the same lines of using this experience, using this event or what situation, I don't even know how to put it into words, but using it as a way to learn from how they were and how they were in the community, to see that they were so involved and to see that they were active members of the community, to see the work that they've done, to be a part of that, and to kind of live, carry on their legacy almost, and to help them, I guess, live on. And that is something that's very important. That's something that's helped me cope with a lot of hardships in my life. And it's always to look back at the person that I've lost, to be what have I learned from them, and what kind of life would they want me to live, right? They didn't leave nothing behind. They left their actions behind. They left who they were as a person behind. And those are good examples for us to use and continue to better our communities and better our environments. If there is a moment to grief, and there is a moment to kind of mourn their loss, but it's how can we move on from this? Not move on from it, but how can we work towards making it better so that this doesn't happen again, right? And I think that's the conversation that everyone is having now. Like, how can we stop this from happening again? But it can only stop once we put in our work to make sure that we're creating an environment where, you know, people who look different, people who dress different, are welcomed into our communities, are welcomed. People who are different are welcomed into our communities, right? Like, it's things like that where we have to be more mindful of our actions, and in doing so, like, I think others will follow suit and will also give in. I think for me the biggest thing was when the shooting happened in Quebec. That was like the first time I was like, this is like, I spent a lot of time in the masjid. Like, that could have been anyone. Like, for me, that was like very, very hard. And I was always like a quiet Muslim. Like, I didn't pray in public or anything. So I was in Waterloo when we did like a whole, we prayed Maghrib in the Student Life Center. And in that moment, I lived at a Catholic university, like a campus. And so I had my Muslim friends on one side, my Catholic friends on the other side. And in that moment, I had to be presently Muslim. And I could have easily been like, I don't want to do it. Like, everyone's watching me. I'm nervous. And I remember the first 2 rak'ahs, like, I was like, I can't do this. Because everyone was watching me, and I was so scared because I was like, they're going to make fun of me. They're going to say these things to me. They're going to be like, oh, you know, like, who's close to them, this and that. But then afterwards, I was like, if you're allowed to represent your religion, and you're allowed to dress a certain way, and you're allowed to do whatever you want to do because it's socially acceptable in a Western society, why am I not allowed to do it? And I remember having that thought. And the last few rak'ahs, I was able to kind of just like stay calm and understand that this is my identity. If I'm not going to put in the work, who's going to put in the work for me, right? And I think that's like the last message that I want to leave everyone, that you have to put in the work in order for you to see the change that we want to see for tomorrow and for our future generations. So thank you so much for having me. This was an amazing experience, honestly. I've learned so much.
Jazakallah for being here. We've learned so much from everyone as well. Kubra, I think you should go next, and then I'll make a final comment.
Okay, great. Yeah, to quickly wrap up, and I know you said that you had missed like the chat and like the different like things that were popping up, but don't worry, I was watching them the whole time. So there weren't questions at the bottom. There were just like 2 questions at the top, and I think I could like tackle them in my final response anyways, because you know I think it kind of goes with it a little bit. But the questions, you know, they're asking, you know, if people are fearful of something, like why are people fearful, and you know, does the lack of knowledge cause that fear? Yeah, and then I guess to add on to that, their final question or second question to that is, you know, does the awareness of Islamophobia reduce the fear of Islam? And I think one important thing that I didn't want to mention is that I think now we've gotten to the point where Islamophobia is no longer a fear of Islam, it's a hatred of Islam. When you're fearful of something, you don't go towards it, you don't you know, take a gun into a masjid and kill people. You don't, you know, take your car into people who that's a child, that's an older woman, that is a mother and a father. You know that they're not going to do anything to you. You know that they're not going to harm you, yet you still deliberately choose to harm them. And that isn't out of fear, that is out of hatred. And I think I want to make that point clear, is that, you know, Islamophobia stems from these discourses, these conversations around white supremacy, you know, and whiteness being the epitome of greatness, and whiteness being the epitome of humanity, when everybody else, you know, Black folks, Indigenous folks, Muslim people, are viewed as sub to that, right? So I think that is a very important thing to internalize within yourself, is, you know, whoever is like watching me say this, like, people aren't scared of you. You're just like the rest of them. It is a hatred for who you are, and I don't think, you know, you're definitely not to blame for that and for who you are. But unfortunately, there are people who are just breeded by white supremacy that kind of, you know, allow that to take over them and to manifest into violent actions against people like us and people that, you know, people who look like you. So that's one thing that I wanted to say. And then also, I do think, you know, having these conversations is really important and really crucial. But at some point, people are aware, you know, these conversations happen and they continue to happen. And, you know, we talk about Islamophobia. But like Amira was mentioning earlier, concrete action also needs to follow that. Like, it isn't, we've consulted Muslim communities, we've had conversations. There are Muslim groups that collect data, that collect these experiences. And I think, we've gotten to the point where we have enough data, we have enough lived experience, we have enough information that has been shared to the government, to the general public. And I think now it's time to kind of turn those conversations into action and actually do what needs to be done to combat all forms of hate, all forms of racism and discrimination. That's the next step, right? These conversations can happen. And I think, yes, an awareness kind of breeds the fact that people are now aware, I guess I would say, that like Islamophobia exists and like it impacts Muslims in XYZ way, and it impacts Muslims with varying identity intersections in different ways as well. And now they're aware of that. Okay, so now what do we do about that, right? So that's why I think these conversations are, of course, very important, and like having the perspective of different Muslims with different identities, because we're not just a monolith. We're Muslim, we're queer, we're disabled, we're Black. You know what I mean? Like, there are different types of Muslims who exist, right? So I think conversation is one thing, and then now we need to kind of move towards action as well.
Jazakallah Kubra, thank you so much for sharing with such insightful thoughts. I quickly want to say, so Islamophobia is not a fear of Islam, but hatred of Islam, hatred of Muslims. Kubra brought it up really, really amazingly. I think there is a conversation happening about changing the term from Islamophobia to anti-Muslim hate to make it more clear that this is just not about fearing certain religion or certain things. It's more about associating certain groups of people with certain traits. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Kulsum obviously brought up, and Kubra and Maria, everyone has brought up the importance of community and how do we move forward with active actions and really show up as ourselves. And that's the most we can do at the end of the day, show up ourselves and show up for what we believe in and for our religion or for whatever our identity and wherever we belong to it is. Jazakallah to you all. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for your wonderful, wonderful insights and lived experiences. It is a hard time. It is hard to stay true to ourselves, but what you do every single day is, subhanAllah, we are all so inspired by everything that you have shared and everything that you are. So Jazakallah for what you do. And again, Jazakallah for being here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant the family Jannatul Firdaus, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal the hearts of the London community and the loved ones of this community. It is just can't imagine what they're going through. So Jazakallah to everyone. We will say goodbye. We'll part our ways from here, and Abrar can take it from here.
Assalamu
alaikum. I'd like to thank you all for all your words and sharing your experiences with us. It really was insightful and it meant a lot. Thanks for helping us to create this brave space. We like to say brave space because when feelings of safety are compromised with an incident like this, we can't really say a safe space, but we can say it's a brave space that really shows our resiliency and your resiliency. I think you showed great resiliency today, and I thank you all for being here and starting this important conversation. Thank you so much. And now I'll pass it over to Abrar for the closing remarks. Thank you.
So thank you so much for our panelists and Sabia, moderator. It was such a moving conversation, and I always feel so heartwarmed whenever I see us as visible minority and as visible women having space to really share our feelings and our personal experiences, where that space is not really provided to us everywhere. So, and that's what motivates me personally and motivate us at the organization to create way more spaces. And we're hoping, inshallah, but after today, to have enough support and sponsors and people who are interested in giving such spaces to other women who were not able to be with us today. And grant that in other cities. But I'm really grateful to everyone who were our speakers today, to CMAP, our artists, for sharing such a beautiful piece of art, honoring Madiha, the mother of the Afzaal family, and to every panelist, Cobra, Kalthum, Amira, and Maria. I have I have personal connection with some of them, and they're wonderful women. They're achievable. They're dreamer and determined, and they already make a lot of change in the community. So I always get inspired from all of them, and especially also Sasabia. Such a true great friend to me personally and to us at the organization. And I wanted today to thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us. And I want to thank our partner and supporter for today, the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion. They were our partner at the pilot project, and they really brought it to light. And we're hoping with their support also to bring it again to Hamilton and probably other places. Thank you to every support we got from other organizations like Smile Canada, Islamic Relief Canada, for also their support through social media. We're always, heartwarmed with that support, and with them seeing that the importance of such an important work to be created, such an important conversation. And I want to also, after, please enjoy the rest of your day. But before that, we want to give it to Dr. Nahla, because she has such a passion to be with us today. And for some such reason, the connection when you're traveling is really not as good. So we want to give it to her with her expertise in mental health, and with her expertise to give us a little of wind down, probably breathing after such a tough and intense conversation. I'll pass it on to you, Dr. Nahla, and thank you so much for being determined to be with us today. And I'm terribly sorry about the connection. I know how it feels, and I hope now you have the connection. On to you, please. After that, feel free to wrap up the event for today. Thank you so much, Nahla.
No, thank you all for being so patient with me. Like, I can't imagine how it's all like on your end, having to hear me chop up and just not be coherent at all. So the internet should be a bit better now. And I honestly, personally need to do some box breathing because I'm so stressed because I was just trying to find internet this whole time. So I want to end with box breathing because it's a very good tool for grounding yourself and for making your nervous system feel more safe. And I know that this and speakers have cultivated the rest today, but also I think that it's important for us to intentionally kind of give ourselves that safety too. But before I do that, I wanted to just make sure I concluded what I was hoping to convey earlier in the talk, which is the third point surrounding discrimination and Islamophobia, which actually kind of ties into what everyone else was saying earlier today about resiliency. The reason I want to talk about this is because I don't think that all of us need to be able to kind of bounce back from traumatic experiences or racist or discriminatory events. And I don't feel like personally, this might be a hot take, but I don't feel like personally we need to be resilient in these situations. And I think somebody did mention this very beautifully. They said resiliency doesn't mean that you're strong and you're okay and you don't feel anything or you just kind of move on with your life. But to me, sometimes resiliency does mean that. And I want us to make sure that all of us are safe and okay with being angry, with being upset, with being numb, with being sad, with feeling alienated or isolated, with every single emotion, like all the range of emotions. I'm just going to go sit down one sec. So I just wanted to conclude by saying that, and if everyone would like to join me, we can do some box breathing together. I am very sorry about the mask, but I'll just guide you all in the process of box breathing. So what this process is inhaling for 4 seconds, holding the inhaled breath for 4 seconds, then exhaling for 4 seconds, and holding that for 4 seconds. So I'll do one cycle, and then you'd be able to hopefully do that later on. So we'll do one together. So take an inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. And with repeated cycles of that, it is very, very common to the nervous system. And I hope that that allowed you some sense of peace and calm. Thank you, Abrar, and everyone for letting me join today despite the chaoticness of all of this. And I promise I'll make it up to you. And thank you, everybody, for speaking today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neha. I appreciate your words and you winding everyone down after this hard topic. And it is really important to remember that we don't always have to be okay with things. We don't always have to be resilient in these hard times. It's okay not to be okay. And I want to thank you all for watching. Once again, thank all our panelists, everyone who spoke today, and all our viewers. And if you found this conversation hard and you feel like you need some extra support, there are a lot of people here that are willing to support you. You can message us, you can reach out to your loved ones, do whatever you need to do to stay safe and happy and healthy. Thank you so much.